Morning sunlight spilled through the towering windows of the Ridgewood Police Department, bathing the station in a warm, golden hue. The air buzzed with the familiar symphony of ringing phones, the murmur of officers in conversation, and the faint hum of the coffee machine brewing its first pot of the day. Yet beneath this lively rhythm was a subtle tension, like a storm gathering on the horizon. The source of this tension strode confidently into the precinct. Officer Martin Graves, a tall, broad-shouldered figure, carried himself with the air of someone who believed his version of right and wrong was the only truth. Known for his brash attitude and a streak of prejudice, Martin had just returned from a grueling overnight patrol in Southside, a neighborhood synonymous with economic struggles and crime. Despite the fatigue etched on his face, there was an unmistakable glimmer of pride in his eyes, a sense of satisfaction that reinforced his rigid worldview. As Martin made his way toward the front desk, his gaze landed on an older woman standing patiently nearby. Rose Morgan, her silver hair neatly styled and her modest beige blazer immaculate, stood out in the bustling station. She was quietly conversing with an officer, her warm smile and composed demeanor creating a stark contrast to the chaotic energy around her. To Martin, she was just another civilian with a pointless complaint, likely there to waste valuable police time. "Great," he muttered under his breath, irritation flickering across his face. His disdain sharpened his stride as he approached her, his boots striking the tiled floor with a force that demanded attention. "Ma'am," he said curtly, his tone as cold as the January morning outside. "This is a police station, not a place to hang out. If you don't have official business, I'll need you to leave." The officers nearby exchanged glances but remained silent. It wasn't unusual for Martin to assert himself like this, but something about the calm poise of the older woman made the exchange more compelling. Rose turned to face him fully, her serene expression unwavering. Her eyes, sharp, perceptive, and slightly narrowed, met his. "Do you think I'm wasting your time, officer?" she asked, her voice soft but layered with quiet authority. Martin crossed his arms, his pride fueling his response. "If you don't have a valid reason to be here, then yes," he said, stepping closer. "Now, I suggest you move along before I have to repeat myself." The room seemed to hold its breath as he reached out to lightly tap her shoulder, a small, dismissive gesture that carried more disrespect than he realized. "Officer Graves." The commanding voice cut through the tension like a whip. Martin froze mid-motion, turning sharply to see Captain Leonard Blake striding toward him. Blake's stern expression was enough to silence even the most confident officer, and Martin was no exception. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Blake's voice was icy, his tone leaving no room for excuses. Martin's confidence faltered. "Sir, I was just—" Blake didn't let him finish. "Do you even know who this is?" He gestured toward Rose, who stood silently, her composed demeanor unchanged. Martin frowned, confusion mingling with irritation. "No, sir, but I'm certain she's—" "Captain Rose Morgan," Blake interrupted sharply, "your new commanding officer." The words landed like a thunderclap, and for a moment, Martin was too stunned to respond. He turned back to Rose, who offered him a faint, knowing smile, her eyes twinkling with the subtle amusement of someone used to reactions like his. "Welcome to the team, Officer Graves," she said coolly, her voice steady. "We'll be having a conversation later today." The weight of her words settled heavily on Martin's shoulders as the day wore on, casting a shadow over his every move. When the time came, he was summoned to a private meeting in the precinct's conference room. Captain Morgan sat at the head of the table, her presence commanding despite her calm posture. She gestured for Martin to take a seat across from her. "Do you know why you're here?" she asked, her tone even but cutting. Martin hesitated, his mind racing for an explanation. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he began. "I didn't mean to." "A misunderstanding?" Rose interrupted, leaning forward slightly. Her eyes locked onto his, sharp and unwavering. "You think your actions in the lobby, your blatant disrespect, can be brushed off so easily?" Martin opened his mouth to respond, but Rose continued, her voice firm. "Your conduct was unacceptable. You judge me not on my role but on your assumptions. As a police officer, your duty is to protect and serve, not to belittle and stereotype. Her words stung, but Martin forced himself to meet her gaze. You have two choices, she said, her tone as unyielding as steel. First, you can resign. If you choose that path, your record will reflect exactly why you left. Or, you can accept a transfer to Meadow Ridge, a precinct where you'll face the community you've clearly misunderstood. There, you'll have the opportunity to rebuild trust. But know this, if you choose to stay, this is your last chance. Martin's pride flared. Meadow Ridge, he scoffed. That place is a nightmare. Rose's expression hardened. Nightmare or not, it's where you'll confront the consequences of your biases. Make your choice, Officer Graves. Realizing he had no viable alternative, Martin reluctantly agreed to the transfer, though his frustration simmered beneath the surface. Unbeknownst to him, the path ahead would challenge not only his career but his very identity. The lessons waiting in Meadow Ridge would test his beliefs, his resolve, and, most importantly, his capacity for change. Meadow Ridge was nothing like the precinct Martin Graves had grown accustomed to. The neighborhood buzzed with energy, its streets lined with vibrant murals, local vendors, and kids playing in the narrow alleys. Yet beneath the colorful surface lay a community scarred by years of systemic neglect and strained relationships with law enforcement. For Martin, this transfer felt like a punishment, a daily reminder of the career misstep that had landed him here. He wasn't alone in thinking so. His new partner, Derek Hill, greeted him with a mix of skepticism and quiet professionalism. Derek was a seasoned officer, deeply respected in the Meadow Ridge community for his empathetic approach. While Martin saw himself as a man of authority, Derek operated as a bridge between the precinct and the people, building trust through patience, understanding, and an ability to truly listen. Their first patrol together was tense. Martin's rigid demeanor clashed with Derek's more relaxed and personable style. At every stop, whether it was a group of teenagers hanging out by the corner store or a shopkeeper reporting a minor theft, Derek's approach was the same. Calm, engaging, and respectful. Why are you wasting time chatting with these people? Martin muttered after one such encounter. Derek shot him a glance, but didn't respond immediately. Instead, he waited until they were back in the squad car. It's not wasting time, he said, his tone measured. It's called building trust. You can't police a community you don't understand. Martin scoffed, crossing his arms. Trust doesn't stop crime. No, Derek agreed, but it prevents a lot of it before it starts. You'll see. For weeks, Martin struggled to adapt. He clung to his old habits, his interactions with residents cold and transactional. But Meadow Ridge was different. Here, people weren't afraid to call out disrespect, and Martin found himself facing criticism more often than he'd ever experienced. It was humbling in a way he wasn't prepared for. One evening, during a routine patrol, Derek brought Martin to a local community center. The building was modest but lively, filled with laughter, music, and the chatter of children. Inside, a group of kids sat in a circle around an elderly man with a weathered guitar. The man's fingers danced over the strings, weaving a melody that seemed to lift the room's energy. Martin, meet Charlie Grant, Derek said, nodding toward the musician. He's one of the cornerstones of this community. Charlie looked up, his warm eyes crinkling with a smile. So you're the new officer everyone's talking about, he said, his tone teasing but kind. Martin managed a polite nod, unsure how to respond. Charlie patted the empty chair beside him. Sit down, son. Let me play you something. Reluctantly, Martin complied, and as Charlie played, he found himself drawn to the music's simplicity and depth. There was a story in every note, a story of struggle, resilience, and hope. After the song ended, Charlie leaned back and regarded Martin thoughtfully. You know, music has a way of bringing people together, he said. Sometimes it can say what words can't. You'd be surprised how much good a little understanding can do. The words stuck with Martin as he and Derek left the center that night. For the first time, he began to wonder if his rigid view of policing had been missing something essential. Over time, Martin's interactions in Meadow Ridge began to shift. Guided by Derek's example and the quiet wisdom of people like Charlie, he started to see the community not as a problem to be solved, but as a collection of individuals with stories, struggles, and aspirations. He learned to listen more, to approach situations with empathy rather than judgment. One pivotal moment came during a domestic disturbance call. Martin and Derek arrived at a small apartment to find a mother and teenage son in a heated argument. The boy, Jamal, was angry and defensive, while his mother was at her wits' end. In the past, Martin might have taken a hardline approach, issuing stern warnings or making an arrest. But this time, he stepped back and watched as Derek calmly de-escalated the situation. Instead of accusing or blaming, Derek asked questions, listened, and offered resources to help the family navigate their challenges. Afterward, as they walked back to the car, Martin couldn't help but ask, "How do you stay so patient?" Derek shrugged. "Because I've been where Jamal is. Sometimes all a kid needs is someone to see them, really see them, and show them there's a better way." Martin thought about that for days, replaying the scene in his mind. He began to see parallels between Jamal and his own past, particularly his complicated relationship with his late father. These thoughts stirred something in him, a desire to do more than just enforce the law. His opportunity came when Charlie invited him to help with a new initiative at the community center, a music program for at-risk youth. At first, Martin was hesitant. He didn't see how he could contribute, let alone connect with kids who saw him as just another cop. But Charlie had a way of nudging people out of their comfort zones. "You don't have to be a musician," he said. "You just have to show up. Be there for them." So Martin did. He started spending his evenings at the center, watching as Charlie taught kids how to play guitar, write lyrics, and express themselves through music. Slowly, Martin found his own role in the program, not as a musician, but as a mentor. He connected most with Jamal, the teenager from the domestic call. Jamal was quiet at first, his trust hard-earned. But as the weeks went by, Martin saw a spark of talent in the way Jamal picked up the guitar, his fingers learning the chords with surprising ease. "You've got a gift," Martin told him one evening after a practice session. Jamal shrugged, but there was a flicker of pride in his eyes. "Maybe. I just like how it feels. Like I can say what I'm feeling without talking." Martin nodded, understanding more than he expected to. "Keep at it. You've got something special here." As the weeks turned into months, the program began to grow, attracting more kids and volunteers. For Martin, it was more than just a project. It was a chance to rebuild not only his relationship with the community, but also his own sense of purpose. But his journey was far from over, and the challenges ahead would test him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Months turned into years, and Meadow Ridge began to transform before Martin Graves' very eyes. What had once been a struggling neighborhood was now alive with hope and progress. The music program at the community center, which Martin had reluctantly joined, had grown into something far greater than anyone had imagined. The Charlie Grant Music Program, named in honor of the elderly musician whose passion had ignited the project, had become a cornerstone of the community. Kids from all walks of life found refuge in the center, their laughter and music filling the halls. The program offered them not just an outlet for their emotions, but a sense of belonging in a world that often overlooked them. One of the program's brightest stars was Jamal, the quiet teenager Martin had mentored. Under Charlie's patient guidance, Jamal had flourished, transforming into a confident and skilled guitarist. He began performing at community events, his music carrying messages of resilience and hope that resonated with everyone who heard him. At one such event, Jamal stood on the modest stage of the community center, his guitar in hand and a nervous smile on his face. The room was packed with families, officers, and local residents, all there to celebrate the program's success. As Jamal played, his fingers moving deftly over the strings, the audience sat in awe, completely captivated by the raw emotion in his music. After his performance, Jamal was approached by a reporter from the local news station covering the event. When asked about his journey, he glanced over at Martin, who stood at the edge of the room, watching with quiet pride. "If it weren't for Officer Graves and this program," Jamal said, his voice steady, "I don't know where I'd be today. They gave me a chance when no one else did." The impact of the program rippled through Meadow Ridge, inspiring similar initiatives across the city. Art workshops, mentorship programs, and career training sessions began to sprout up, creating opportunities for young people who had once felt trapped by their circumstances. Martin, once seen as an outsider in the neighborhood, became an integral part of these efforts. His relationship with Captain Rose Morgan also evolved. What had started as a tense dynamic marked by mutual distrust slowly transformed into one of mutual respect. Rose became a mentor to Martin, offering guidance and reminding him of the importance of humility and self-reflection. "Transformation isn't a destination, Graves," she told him during one of their conversations. "It's a journey. Never stop walking that path." Martin took those words to heart. Over time, he began training new recruits, sharing his story as a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration. He emphasized the importance of empathy and cultural awareness, teaching them that true policing went beyond authority. It was about service, understanding, and building bridges. Outside of work, Martin's connection to Meadow Ridge deepened. He attended community gatherings regularly, from potluck dinners to basketball games to holiday celebrations. The bonds he formed with the residents extended far beyond his role as a police officer. Meadow Ridge wasn't just a place he worked, it had become his home. But as the years passed, life brought its share of bittersweet moments. Charlie Grant, the man who had been the heart of the music program, began to slow down. His health was declining, but his spirit remained as vibrant as ever. On what would be his final visit to the community center, Charlie was greeted with a standing ovation. The kids he had mentored, the volunteers he had inspired, and the officers he had befriended all gathered to celebrate the legacy he had built. When Charlie passed away, the community came together to honor him. Martin spearheaded the effort to rename the music program officially as the Charlie Grant Music Foundation, ensuring that his memory would live on. At the dedication ceremony, Martin stood before a crowd of familiar faces, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Charlie taught me, and so many of us, that music can heal, that it can bring people together in ways we never imagined." This program isn't just his legacy. It's a testament to the power of compassion, understanding, and second chances. As Martin spoke, he caught sight of Jamal in the audience, now an adult and a mentor to the next generation of musicians. The sight filled Martin with pride. Over time, the program's success continued to grow. It expanded across the city, reaching hundreds of young people and providing them with a safe space to express themselves. It wasn't just a music program anymore. It was a movement. Local artists, musicians, and even businesses joined the cause, turning Meadow Ridge into a hub of creativity and hope. Years later, Martin stood on the bustling streets of Meadow Ridge, now a vibrant and thriving community. As he walked, he was greeted with waves and smiles from residents who had come to know him not just as an officer but as a friend and ally. His journey had reshaped not only his career but also his character. The man who once carried a rigid sense of authority had learned the true meaning of service, compassion, understanding, and the courage to change. Redemption, Martin realized, wasn't just about righting the wrongs of the past. It was about building a future where everyone had the chance to thrive. And in Meadow Ridge, that future was alive, shining brighter than ever.